Hello and welcome back to my channel. And before we get into this video, I just want to say, if you are liking the video, please drop a like, please subscribe if you haven't already, and that'll keep you up to date with future content and future videos that I'm coming out. And also, before I get into the video, I want to say that a lot of this data is from here. You can see the Index Gain third-party data provider, which do a great job. Really worth checking out if you haven't done so already. Highly recommend it. So obviously today we're going through, you can see on the screen, youth performance buzz analysis, some of the stats we can look at, and how I've defined youth is players that are 23 and below. The Index Gain site captures this and all of their PB appearances and stats, and this sort of means they've got 10 to 15, maybe even more, career games left. So getting into the video here, I've taken all-time stats in the Index Gain list and filtered out the under 23s and below and looked at how many games they've played all time since the data's been collected so far. And obviously there we've seen that Trent is topping here with 79 games, but all top 10 there within the 70 games plus mark. And some of them playing European football here would heavily help their number of games played and with their involvement within the team. So very impressive, and it seems to favour the 22, 23-year-olds you'd expect having the opportunity to play more games. But there are some surprises here. Kai Havertz, established within a Leverkusen side, 20 years old, that plays 73 games. Trent's still 21, so he's still going to be on this list for another 2 years here. Even Jadon Sancho, they're 20 years old, having played 77 games, moved away from Man City to get that game time, we can see that's what he's getting. So we can move on here to goals scored, and we can see here Kylian Mbappe, an absolute freak of nature. 60 goals, almost twice Moussa Dembele, who's a hot target, on the most teams' watch list at the minute. So, Chelsea, Man United, obviously last season, even Jadon Sancho, double him. And even nearly treble, some of these players like Jesus, or not quite Jesus, but like maybe Richarlison, Martinez. So very, very impressive goal ratio there. And so a lot of these guys obviously banging some goals in. Luka Jovic, probably more last season, haven't quite found his feet at Real Madrid. And so some very impressive figures before he moved over to La Liga, and now obviously there's some rumours in some other clubs wanting to pick him up, and perhaps Chelsea or move to the Premier League. So moving on to assists, we can see Jadon Sancho topping the table here. Very impressive, 20 years old. Recently, Trent second, 21 years old, with 28 assists. Both of those providing a lot of goals. We know Trent with his crosses creating a lot of opportunities for his team. And even Mbappe, for every 4 goals he's involved in, he's scoring 3 and assisting 1, very impressive ratio, also contributing to, perhaps Neymar scoring, for example, or, Di Maria. So very impressive there, along with some other creative midfielders, Havertz again, Pellegrini, that's played a more forward role in Roma this season, Aouar for Lyon, shining under Depay maybe, and then Akone, Christopher Nkunku starting to find his form within the Leipzig team. So moving on to this season in particular, obviously being cut short due to, the reasons that are apparent. But we've looked at specifically here the under-23s that are playing within the top 4 teams and that have played more than 80 minutes on average and played 15 appearances or more. And so 19 players come up within that list, and obviously some familiar names such as De Ligt, Arnold again, Maddison, Chilwell, Odegaard. And you can also see the breakdown here between the leagues, and it's interesting to see, Man City, Chelsea, obviously not in there from the Premier League, and perhaps, their rotation is a bit more, they occurs more often due to protecting players, such as Phil Foden or Mason Mount under Lampard. In particular, Serie A only have 1 player, which was De Ligt, at Juventus. So it's interesting that, Inter Milan, even Martinez on the goal scoring is still protecting him a little bit, average minutes and appearances perhaps. So perhaps he made more appearances, but doesn't average the minutes they protect him with, Lukaku coming in up front. But from these 19 players, it's interesting to note that 13 out of the 19, so a higher percentage of these players have won performance dividends. And what I've done also is list the players that have not won the dividends on the screen for you to see now. And we can see that players such as Klosterman and Kamara are very unlucky not to have won PB there. Klosterman PB max is well over the average score of what the PB defenders would be, and Kamara, they're just shy of what was 242 of the average winning score for a midfielder. But perhaps if he hit this on a single match day or even a double match day, we could have seen, another player there collecting some PB dividends at a young age. So despite these players not winning PB dividends, we can see in general their PB maximum is pretty respectable, and we'd expect it to grow if they gain further involvement within their team. So moving on, we've changed the criteria here slightly and looking at how many players have just won performance dividends in general. And we can see that at the under 23s and below, 78 different players have won performance dividends. And 15 of those have won more than 10 pence or above within this season. 9 of these players from the 15 play within a top 4 team. So 60% they're trying to return more than just, the 2Ps perhaps on a single match day. And if we move on to here, we can see that 18 under 23s have won PB dividends twice or more, showing it's not just a freak occurrence, perhaps, of that single match day. And we see here Trent winning 8 times, way above anyone else, above their 4 other players winning 3 times, Rashford, Jesus, Maddison and Golovin at Monaco, all playing obviously for very decent sides. They're chasing European football, and the remaining 13 winning just twice. But it's also interesting to see that 19 of these under 23s earning 10p or more, in which here is total dividends, so not just PB dividends. And 12 of these play for a top 4 side. And obviously I've said before about top 4 sides being dominant over some of the bottom sides, creating opportunities to win performance bonus dividends. But the remaining 7 here that don't play for a top 4 side that have returned over 10p, and you can see here is Rashford, Diego Jota, Ceballos, Hernandez, and they're all playing for teams that are chasing European football here, so I don't think any of these are in the bottom half of the table as it stands. Even you could suggest, Lyon are usually within Champions League football, even, Man United want to be back into Champions League football. And a lot of them will be playing Europa League football next season. We hope if obviously it carries out as expected, or we hope anyway. So going into a little more depth with this PB score analysis, we've looked at here on the screen, there are the average winning scores for each position and how many under 23 players have beaten this score within their PB maximum. So for example, 21 forwards there have beat the average score of 216.1. And so what's also interesting is I looked a little bit further to see how many players have done this twice or more. And we can see there that a lot more forwards than midfielders and defenders have beaten the average score. It may be because it's a little bit lower, but also forward players are given the opportunity to express themselves on the pitch, may gain more minutes than defenders and midfielders, perhaps because their mistakes are not as costly as the others. So it's interesting there that Jota has over 3 times there, and also returned a reasonable amount of PB dividends this season, particularly with recent form in the Europa League. And you got some other familiar names there. Mbappe, Rashford beating the score twice. So there's some potential PB here in the long term, as well as this season beating the average scores. And then we can also take a look here at midfielders, defenders. Trent 8 times, absolutely massive. Way ahead of anyone else. It's 3 and the 2s. So I'm just going to finish off this season's stats by looking at goals, assists, goal contributions, and their PB maximums this season. So beginning with goals, obviously Kylian Mbappe there, 23 goals this season, astonishing number. But the gap isn't so big this time and just this season rather than all time. With Haaland there second, Sancho third, very familiar names here, all forwards I believe here. I don't think there are any midfielders. No midfielders here other than perhaps you would class Sancho, as a wide man rather than a number 9. So they're putting up these stats is very, very impressive. And moving on to assists, obviously here we get into some midfielders, wide men, tens, and even some forwards here, a mixture of positions, but all generally rather forward positions. But Sancho there smashed it this season, 8 assists in PEB eligible games, and Trent there second and 13. So it's interesting to see that Sancho's goal and assists, are so high, and his PEB stats on average are pretty decent. But it'd be interesting to see if he starts hitting a lot more PEB dividends in the future, being a lot more of a key player on the ball as well as his goal and assist output. But some also other names there starting to appear. Marcus Thuram there, and the Kulusevski, is that how you pronounce it? I think so. But moving to Juve, it'd be interesting to see if his output increases next season. And so they're looking at just total goal contributions. Sancho just pipping Mbappe this season with 36 over 32 in the PB eligible games. Even Rashford with his injury towards just before the break now in the season, 22 still very impressive. Jesus, despite obviously not getting as much game time with Aguero, and then still obviously someone like Havertz, 18 is very impressive. For number 10 goals and assists, both 9 of each for Leverkusen, obviously a very key player for them, and obviously some very hot links between Bayern Munich or Liverpool. If he's going to come to the Premier League. And then obviously finally, as mentioned, looking at just PB maximum this season, ranking the top 10, we see that Ben Chilwell in at 342, I believe was either the England game in which he started to take some set pieces, or perhaps it may have been the 9-0 win over Southampton. So obviously gave them a huge opportunity to hit a massive score that night. As well as, we've got 5 players there hitting over 300 scores, very impressive. Trent just missing out by a point, and Cuckoo just by 3 points there. So a lot of youngsters here are still hitting peak scores, particularly obviously when they play within dominant games or just have an absolute worldie and really, really turn it on and perform. So getting towards the end here, I just want to look at some possible future performers, and the reason I picked them out is because they're particularly low in their minutes per game, although their output is still reasonably good, particularly when you look at someone like Mason Greenwood here or Alexander Isaac, Sociedad there, 9 and 10 goals, very impressive. Even Leon Bailey there, maybe he's, I know he makes a lot of appearances for, I forgot who he even plays with, but he's often subbed and protected. And, the same with the likes of, Callum Hudson-Odoi, even Phil Foden we're all aware of at Man City there, averaging just, 30 minutes per game. Obviously, he's probably just coming on for the extra 10 minutes there and then bringing up his average from the few starts he's played, 60, 70 minutes in a game. Obviously he played against Tottenham and scored, 1-0 win there. So I think these are some players to look out for, and we can see how their PB develops over time. But obviously very exciting players that people are aware of, especially there, Ansu Fati, 17 years old at Barcelona. How is his career going to turn out? And so finally, I just want to say this, in my opinion, is sort of a pathway to performance buzz wins, and the steps towards this for younger players. And obviously the first step is just playing regularly. If you can't play like 80, 90 minutes, then perhaps you're going to limit your PB success. And this may apply slightly for older players. If they're having to come off with 10, 20 minutes left to be rested, then perhaps, they're going to be pipped and come in third or fourth and perhaps obviously not winning, and come in first or winning the dividends. But I also think second is becoming a key player, being involved in more just on the ball more often, being involved in key elements, not just providing assists and goals, but just more passes, being the player that teams look for to get on the ball. We obviously had like Jorginho at Sarri ball. We want to see the younger players, perhaps Kai Havertz is doing that now at Leverkusen, and teams are impressed with him. But I also feel that playing for a big team helps with the whole just match dominance, your whole team dominance with the big team versus a small team, in giving you a better opportunity to win performance dividends. So therefore, for the fourth spot, I've obviously said it's a combination between becoming a key player and playing for a big team. So perhaps if Kai Havertz was to move to, say, Liverpool, started dominating the Premier League and being a massive player for Liverpool, we could see a huge PB increase, but they're just ifs and buts, and whether they fit the style of play, it's all different matters. But obviously the points 2s and 3 could change slightly. So you could obviously be brought through the academy of a big team, and you need to work to becoming, playing regularly and then becoming a key player. Or you may be a key player at a smaller team, get a transfer. So in the situation there, I've mentioned Kai Havertz or the Kuleveski that's going to Juve, going from a smaller team to a bigger team, and that may increase your PB output if you're given the opportunity to perform and you take that. And that is going to round up this video on youth PB under 23s. Really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please drop a like down below and subscribe if you haven't already, and look forward to future content, and I will see you all later.